I stood in the center of the ballroom at the Riverside Country Club, surrounded by roughly 100 guests who had come to celebrate my mother's 60th birthday. Crystal chandeliers glittered overhead. Champagne flowed. Everyone wore their finest clothes. My parents stood 10 feet away from me, their faces twisted with contempt. My father pointed at me and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "We wish you were never born. Marcus is the real son we wanted." My mother nodded, adding, "You've been nothing but a disappointment." The room fell silent. Some people laughed nervously. Others looked away. 20 years of mistreatment crashed down on me in that moment. I felt something break inside, then rebuild stronger. I looked my parents in the eye and said with quiet dignity, "If that is what you wish, then consider me as if I never existed." I turned and walked out into the night. Behind me, the party continued. I drove away from the country club with my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The road blurred in front of me as I processed what had just happened. My phone started buzzing in the cup holder, but I ignored it. I just needed to drive, to put distance between myself and that room full of people who had witnessed my humiliation. 10 miles down the highway, I pulled into a small diner called Rosie's. The neon sign flickered in the darkness. I parked in the back corner of the lot and sat there for a moment, trying to steady my breathing. My phone continued to vibrate, the screen lighting up again and again. Inside the diner, I slid into a booth by the window and ordered black coffee from a waitress who looked like she had seen every kind of human misery and learned not to ask questions. I pulled out my phone and stared at the screen. 38 missed calls, all within the last 30 minutes. Mother, father, Marcus, Aunt Linda, Uncle George, Cousin Jennifer, mother again, father again, Marcus, 3 more times. The list went on and on. I scrolled through the voicemails. The first few were angry. My mother's voice dripped with venom. "How dare you embarrass us like that? Get back here immediately." My father sounded coldly furious. "You will regret this, Elijah." But then the tone shifted. The next voicemails were panicked, desperate. My mother's voice cracked. "Elijah, please. You need to come back right now. This is serious." My father actually sounded afraid. "Son, we need to talk. Please call me back." I deleted them all without listening to the end. Whatever crisis they faced now, they had brought it on themselves. I had spent 32 years being the family scapegoat while my older brother Marcus played the golden child. I had endured their criticism, their comparisons, their constant reminders that I was not good enough. Tonight had simply been the final straw. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from my younger sister Emma. She was 24, finishing her senior year at Columbia. Emma was the only member of my family I truly loved, the only one who had ever shown me genuine kindness. The text read, "Please answer. Something bad is happening. They need you." I stared at those words for a long moment. Then I called her back. Emma answered on the first ring. "Elijah, oh, thank God. Where are you?" "I'm at a diner." "What's going on?" She was crying. I could hear the panic in her voice. "Right after you left, these 2 men in suits showed up at the party. They said they were from Sterling Federal Bank. They were looking for you. They started making announcements in front of everyone, saying something about a loan that's overdue." My stomach dropped. "What kind of loan?" $750,000. "They said it's 3 months past due, and without your signature authorizing an extension, the whole thing goes into default immediately. Mom and Dad are freaking out. They're saying the family business is going to collapse." I closed my eyes. Preston Properties, my parents' real estate development company, the business they had built over 30 years, the source of all their wealth and social status. "Emma, why would they need my signature?" "They said you're the co-signer. You're the guarantor on the entire business loan portfolio." Mom and Dad didn't know what they were talking about at first, but then the bank people showed them paperwork. "Your name is all over it." I felt something cold settle in my chest. Yes, my name was all over it. Because for the past 5 years, I had been secretly covering my parents' business debts. They had no idea that Preston Properties was failing. that their luxury lifestyle was built on money I wired from my own tech consulting business every single month. I had set up automatic payments tied to my biometric authentication at Sterling Federal. It was a sophisticated system I had designed myself. Every 72 hours, I had to check in with the bank using my fingerprint and a security code. If I failed to check in, all financial guarantees terminated immediately. There was an emergency override. If I went to the bank within 24 hours and reauthorized everything, the payments would continue. The business would survive. But tonight, when I told my parents to consider me as if I never existed, I had triggered the fail-safe. The system did exactly what I programmed it to do. It shut down. "Elijah, you have to come back," Emma pleaded. "Everyone is asking where you went. The bank people are still here. They're saying, if you don't show up and sign papers tonight, they're starting foreclosure proceedings tomorrow morning." "Let me think about it," I said quietly. "What do you mean, think about it? This is our family's entire livelihood." "Emma, did you hear what they said to me tonight?" She was silent for a moment. Then, softly, "I heard. It was horrible. But they were drunk, Elijah. They didn't mean it. They meant every word. They've always felt that way. You know it as well as I do. Please," she whispered. "Even if you're angry at them, don't let the business fail. Think about all the employees who depend on those paychecks. Think about the families who invested in our projects." That hit harder than I wanted to admit. I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache building. "I'll think about it, I promise. But I'm not coming back tonight." "Will you at least call the bank?" I said I'll think about it. After I hung up, I sat there nursing my coffee and watching the occasional car pass on the highway. My phone continued to buzz, but I ignored it. At some point, the calls stopped being panicked and started being threatening. My brother Marcus left a voicemail that made my blood boil. "Elijah, stop being such a child. Get back here and fix this. You're being selfish and ridiculous. Mom and Dad were drunk. They apologize, okay? Now stop this tantrum and do what you're supposed to do." I deleted it and turned off my phone. The truth was more complicated than Emma knew. Yes, I was supporting my parents' business, but they had no idea I was doing it. They thought Preston Properties was thriving on its own merit, that my father was still the brilliant developer he had been 20 years ago. They believed their own legend. In reality, the business had started failing 5 years ago. Bad investments, market downturns. My father's refusal to adapt to changing trends. I had discovered the truth by accident when I built a new cybersecurity system for one of their banking partners. The numbers were catastrophic. I could have let it collapse then. But I thought about Emma, who was still in high school at the time. I thought about the employees, good people with mortgages and families. I thought about my grandmother Margaret, who had built the company's original reputation, and would have been devastated to see it fail. So I quietly created a network of shell accounts and automated transfers. I funneled money from my tech consulting business into Preston Properties, without anyone knowing. I became the invisible foundation, holding up the entire structure. My parents continued to treat me like a failure, comparing me unfavorably to Marcus at every family gathering. They mocked my career choice, saying tech consulting was for people who couldn't handle real business. They never knew their real business was only surviving because of me. And tonight, they told me they wished I was never born. I paid for my coffee and walked back to my car. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of rain. I drove to my apartment in downtown Portland, a modern loft in a converted warehouse that I had bought with my own money. It was my sanctuary, the one place where I didn't have to be the disappointment son. As I pulled into the parking garage, I saw a figure leaning against the wall near the elevator. My brother Marcus. He was wearing the same expensive suit from the party, his tie loosened, his expression calculating. "We need to talk," he said. I considered getting back in my car and driving away, but Marcus moved to block the exit. He held up his hands in a gesture that was meant to look peaceful but came across as condescending. "Come on, Elijah. Don't be dramatic. Let's just talk for 5 minutes. I have nothing to say to you." "Fine. Then just listen." He walked closer, and I could smell the alcohol on his breath. The charm he usually deployed was still there, but fraying at the edges. "Look, Mom and Dad were way out of line tonight. I get it. They had too much champagne, they were showing off in front of their friends, and they said some really stupid things. They said they wished I was never born. Marcus waved his hand dismissively. They were drunk. People say crazy stuff when they're drunk. You know they didn't mean it. I know they meant every single word. His jaw tightened. Okay, fine. Be hurt. Be angry. You have that right. But do you really want to destroy the family business over it? Do you want to put 60 people out of work because your feelings got hurt? My feelings got hurt? I felt anger rising in my chest, hot and sharp. Marcus, they have treated me like garbage for my entire life. Every achievement I ever had, they dismissed. Every struggle I faced, they blamed me for. Meanwhile, you could do no wrong. You were the perfect son who could never fail, even when you failed constantly. His face flushed red. What's that supposed to mean? It means I know Preston Properties is failing. I know Father's last 3 development projects lost money. I know the luxury condo deal in Beaverton fell through because nobody wanted to invest. I know the strip mall renovation in Hillsborough is 6 months behind schedule and bleeding cash. I know everything, Marcus, because I'm the one who's been keeping the business afloat for 5 years. He stared at me. What are you talking about? You really don't know, do you? None of you know. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. I've been covering the debts. I set up the loan guarantees. I'm the reason the bank hasn't foreclosed already. My money, from my apparently insignificant tech consulting business, has been propping up Preston Properties while you all congratulated yourselves on being such brilliant entrepreneurs. Marcus's expression shifted from confusion to calculation. I could see him processing this information, looking for angles, trying to figure out how to use it. That was Marcus. Everything was a chess game. Okay, he said slowly. So you've been helping out. That's great, Elijah. That's really generous. But that doesn't mean you should pull the plug now. Come to the bank tomorrow, sign the extension, and we can all sit down and figure out a better arrangement. Maybe you can be more involved in the business decisions. Would you like that? A seat at the table? I don't want anything from you people anymore. You people? He stepped closer, and now the charm was completely gone. The real Marcus was showing through. We're your family, Elijah. Like it or not, we're blood. You walk away from this, and you're walking away from all of us, including Emma. Is that what you want? The mention of Emma made me pause. Marcus saw the hesitation and pressed his advantage. Emma needs us. She's still in college. She depends on the family support. If the business collapses, what happens to her trust fund? What happens to her tuition? Her trust fund is separate. Grandmother set it up before she died. Yeah, but who manages it? Mom and Dad. And if they're bankrupt, tied up in legal battles, do you think Emma is going to see a dime of that money when she needs it? I felt the trap closing. Of course they would use Emma. They knew she was my weak point. Sign the papers, Marcus said, his voice hardening. Come to the bank tomorrow and sign the extension. Or I promise you, you'll regret this. We have lawyers, Elijah. Good ones. They can make your life very difficult. Are you threatening me? I'm telling you how it is. You don't get to blow up everyone's life because you're having a tantrum. Grow up and do the right thing. He turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing in the parking garage. I stood there for a long moment before going inside. My apartment felt cold and empty. I poured myself 3 fingers of whiskey and stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows looking out at the city lights. My phone was still off. I didn't want to hear any more voicemails or read any more guilt trip texts. At midnight, someone knocked on my door. I looked through the peephole and saw Emma standing in the hallway. She was still wearing her dress from the party. Mascara streaked down her face from crying. I opened the door immediately. Emma, what are you doing here? It's late. She walked past me into the apartment and collapsed onto my couch, sobbing. I sat down next to her and put my arm around her shoulders, letting her cry. After a few minutes, she pulled away and wiped her eyes. I need to show you something, she said. She opened her purse and pulled out a folder full of documents. These are from my trust fund, the one Grandma Margaret set up for me before she died. I took the folder and started reading. The trust contained $50,000 designated for Emma's final year of college, tuition, and housing expenses. But there was a clause I had never seen before. Distributions required signatures from both parents and from me as the secondary trustee. I didn't know I was a trustee on this, I said. Grandma added you 2 years ago, right before she passed. She wanted to make sure I would be protected. She said you were the only one in the family with integrity. That sounded like Grandmother Margaret. She had been sharp as a blade until the very end. Emma, why are you showing me this now? Because I need that money by Monday. Fall term tuition is due. If I don't pay, I get dropped from all my classes. I'll lose my housing in the dorm. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. Mom and Dad are using this to manipulate you. They told me to come here and beg you to sign for my trust, and then sign for the business loans. They're holding my education hostage. I felt rage building in my chest, white hot and consuming. Those absolute bastards. I told them I wouldn't do it. I told them to leave you alone. But they said if you don't sign both, they won't sign my trust distribution either. They'll just let me lose everything. She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. Elijah, I don't care about the business. Let it fail if that's what you want. But please don't let me lose my last year of college because of their games. I pulled her into a hug. Emma, I promise you, I will not let that happen. You're going to finish Columbia. I'll make sure of it. How? If they won't sign the trust papers, I don't have access to the money. Then I'll pay for it myself. You don't need the trust fund. I'll cover your tuition and housing directly. Elijah, that's $50,000. I don't care. You're not getting dragged into their mess. She hugged me tighter. Thank you. I'm so sorry about what they said tonight. It was cruel and wrong, and you didn't deserve any of it. After Emma left, I went to my home office and pulled out all the documents related to Preston Properties. I had boxes of files, years of financial records that I had kept meticulously. I started going through them, looking for something, though I wasn't sure what. At 3 a.m, I found it. Buried in the loan documents from Sterling Federal were signatures that looked like mine, except I had never signed those papers. I checked the dates. 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, 18 months ago. 12 loans in total, each one carrying my supposedly authorized signature. Someone had forged my name. Someone had been using my identity and my credit to secure loans for Preston Properties without my knowledge or consent. I grabbed my phone and turned it back on. I needed to call my lawyer, Timothy Brooks, a man I trusted who had helped me set up my business 5 years ago. But it was 3 a.m. The call would have to wait until daylight. Instead, I kept digging through the documents. Each forged signature was notarized by the same person, Donald Whitmore, attorney at law, my family's personal attorney, my father's college roommate and friend for 40 years. The full picture started coming into focus. My parents had been forging my signature on loan documents for years, using my credentials and my reputation to secure money for their failing business. The notarizations made it all look legitimate. And if the business failed, I would be the one legally liable for millions of dollars in debt. They hadn't just wished I was never born. They had actively set me up to take the fall for their failures. I sat back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. The trap was more sophisticated than I had imagined. If I walked away now, creditors would come after me for the forged debts. If I signed new extensions, I would be voluntarily accepting liability for everything. Either way, I was caught. Saturday morning came with gray clouds and the threat of rain. I met my lawyer, Timothy Brooks, at his office at 8 o'clock. Timothy was in his mid-50s, a careful man who had built his practice on helping small business owners navigate complex legal waters. He made coffee while I spread the loan documents across his conference table. How long have these forgeries been going on? He asked. At least 3 years. Probably longer. Timothy put on his reading glasses and examined each signature carefully. He pulled up digital copies of my real signature from the business incorporation documents and compared them side by side with the forged ones. After 20 minutes, his face had gone pale. This is bad, Elijah. These are sophisticated forgeries. Not perfect, but good enough to fool most people. and the notarizations make them legally binding unless you can prove they're fake. Can I prove it? With forensic handwriting analysis, maybe. But that takes time and money. We're talking months of legal battles and tens of thousands of dollars in expert fees. Meanwhile, these loans are in default. The creditors don't care if the signatures are forged. They just want their money. I felt the walls closing in. What if I just let it all collapse? Let Preston Properties go bankrupt and walk away? Timothy shook his head slowly. You can't walk away. Your name is on these documents. If the business fails, the creditors will come after you personally for the outstanding debts. We're talking about $2 million or more. They'll seize your assets, garnish your income, destroy your credit. Even if you eventually prove the forgeries, the damage will be done. So what do I do? You have two options. First, you can sign the extension at Sterling Federal and keep the business alive while we quietly build a case proving forgery. That way, nothing collapses, nobody gets hurt, and we have time to untangle this mess legally. And the second option? You refuse to sign, let it all burn down, and prepare for the worst. Bankruptcy, lawsuits, years of legal hell. But eventually, if we prove the forgeries, you might come out clean on the other end. I thought about Emma needing her tuition money. I thought about the 60 employees at Preston Properties who had nothing to do with my parents' crimes. I thought about the families who had invested in development projects, trusting the Preston name. I'll sign for Emma's trust fund, I said finally. She needs to finish college. But I'm not touching the business loans. Elijah, if the business fails, you're looking at personal financial ruin. Then that's what happens. I'm done being their safety net. Timothy sighed and took off his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. All right. Let me draft a letter to Sterling Federal explaining your position. We'll request they conduct their own investigation into the loan documents. It won't stop the foreclosure, but it might slow things down. We agreed to meet Emma at Sterling Federal at noon to sign her trust fund distribution. Timothy would come with me as my legal representative. I left his office feeling slightly better, at least having a plan, even if it was a plan that ended with my financial destruction. That feeling lasted exactly 30 minutes. I was sitting in a coffee shop down the street from Timothy's office when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Sterling Federal Bank, but it wasn't the loan department. It was the fraud investigation unit. Mr. Preston, this is Agent Sarah Chen from Sterling Federal's Fraud and Compliance Division. I need to speak with you immediately. Can you come to the bank within the hour? What's this about? I'd prefer to discuss it in person, Mr. Preston. It's urgent. I called Timothy and told him to meet me at the bank right away. Something in Agent Chen's voice had sent ice water through my veins. We met her in a small conference room on the 3rd floor of Sterling Federal's main branch. Agent Chen was a woman in her late 30s, wearing a dark suit and an expression that gave nothing away. She had a laptop and several folders spread on the table. Mr. Preston, thank you for coming in so quickly. Mr. Brooks, I appreciate you joining us. She folded her hands on the table. I'm going to be direct with you. Preston Properties is under federal investigation for wire fraud and money laundering. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table. What? We've been monitoring transactions on several accounts linked to Preston Properties for the past 8 months. There are significant irregularities. We've coordinated with the FBI and the Securities and Exchange Commission. The case is extensive. Timothy leaned forward. What exactly are you alleging? Agent Chen opened one of the folders. Preston Properties has been operating what appears to be a Ponzi scheme for at least 5 years. Richard and Catherine Preston have been taking investor money for luxury condominium developments, using new investor funds to pay returns to previous investors, while the actual construction projects are either non-existent or dramatically behind schedule. I couldn't breathe. How much money? At least $11 million from approximately 40 individual investors. Many of them are families who invested their retirement savings. I had nothing to do with that, I said immediately. I don't work for Preston Properties. I have my own business. We know about your tech consulting business. We've been examining those accounts as well. She pulled out another document. Mr. Preston, Your name appears on numerous documents related to Preston Properties. Loan applications, bank accounts, property deeds, investor agreements. Either you're deeply involved in this scheme, or someone has been using your identity extensively. They forged my signatures, I said. I have proof. That's what everyone says when they get caught. Agent Chen's expression didn't change. Mr. Preston, I'm not here to arrest you today, but I need you to understand the seriousness of this situation. The FBI will be filing federal charges soon. Wire fraud carries a maximum sentence of 20 years in prison. If you're involved, cooperating early might help you. Timothy jumped in. My client is a victim here, not a perpetrator. We have evidence of signature forgery. We were literally about to bring this to your attention. I'll need to see that evidence. Agent Chen made a note. In the meantime, all accounts with Elijah Preston's name are being frozen pending investigation. That includes your business accounts. Mr. Preston, the floor dropped out from under me. You're freezing my business accounts? Standard procedure in fraud investigations. You'll have access to basic personal accounts for living expenses, but all business assets are frozen until we complete our investigation. How long will that take? Weeks. Possibly months. I thought about my employees. I had 8 people working for me, good people with families and bills. Payroll was due next Friday. Rent on the office space was due in 10 days. Without access to my accounts, I couldn't pay anyone anything. This is insane, I said. I'm the victim here. Then prove it, Agent Chen said calmly. Cooperate fully with our investigation. Provide all documents and testimony we request. If you're innocent, the truth will come out. Timothy and I left the bank in a daze. On the sidewalk outside, he turned to me and said something I would never forget. Elijah, you need to prepare yourself. This is about to get much worse before it gets better. He was right. By Saturday afternoon, news of the investigation had leaked to the media. I don't know who talked, whether it was someone at the bank or the FBI or just one of the 40 investor families demanding answers, but suddenly my face was all over the local news. Preston Properties. Scandal. Family real estate empire. Under federal investigation for fraud. My phone exploded with notifications. Clients from my tech consulting business were sending emails demanding explanations. 2 called to cancel contracts immediately. My employees were panicking, asking if they still had jobs. Friends I had known for years were suddenly too busy to answer my calls. I went home and found reporters waiting outside my building. News vans with satellite dishes parked along the street. Cameras pointed at the entrance. I had to drive around to the service entrance and sneak in through the loading dock. Inside my apartment, I poured whiskey and tried to think. Everything was falling apart faster than I could process. My parents had set me up. The federal government thought I was a criminal. My business was frozen. My reputation was destroyed. My phone buzzed. Emma's name flashed on the screen. I answered immediately. Elijah, oh my God, I just saw the news. This can't be real. Tell me it's not real. It's real. But I didn't do anything wrong. Mom and Dad have been running a Ponzi scheme. They've been forging my signatures. No. Dad wouldn't do that. There has to be some mistake. Emma, I have proof. I have the documents. They've been using my name for years without my knowledge. She was quiet for a long moment. Dad's in the hospital. What? He had a heart attack. About an hour ago. We're at County Memorial. It's serious, Elijah. You need to come. Guilt crashed over me like a wave. Despite everything, despite the forgeries and the cruelty and the years of mistreatment, he was still my father. Is he going to be okay? They don't know yet. Just please come. Mom is falling apart. Marcus is here. We're in the cardiac ICU waiting room. I hung up and stood there for a long moment, wrestling with myself. Part of me wanted to stay away, to protect myself from whatever trap they might spring next. But another part, the part that Emma had always been able to reach, felt responsible. I grabbed my keys and headed for the hospital. County Memorial Hospital was a sprawling complex on the east side of Portland, a maze of towers and parking garages that always smelled faintly of antiseptic and fear. I parked in the visitor lot and made my way to the cardiac ICU on the fourth floor, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses even though it was evening, hoping to avoid being recognized. The waiting room was full of my family. My mother, Catherine, sat in a plastic chair, still wearing her party dress from the night before, her perfect makeup smeared and ruined. Aunt Linda and Uncle George flanked her, offering tissues and words of comfort. My brother Marcus paced near the windows, talking urgently on his phone. Emma sat alone in the corner, her arms wrapped around herself. I went to Emma first. She stood and hugged me tightly. "Thank you for coming." "How is he?" "Stable for now. They did an emergency angioplasty. He's sedated. The doctor said the next 48 hours are critical." Before I could respond, my mother saw me. She crossed the waiting room in 3 strides and slapped me hard across the face. The sound echoed in the quiet space. Several nurses looked over from the central desk. "You did this," she hissed. "You and your selfishness killed your father." I touched my stinging cheek, but kept my voice calm. "I'm sorry he's sick. I truly am. But I didn't cause his heart attack. You destroyed our business. You humiliated us in front of everyone. You turned the government against us." The stress of it all stopped his heart. She was shaking with rage. "My son has stolen $2 million from our family business, and now he's going to let his father die. I never stole anything." "Liar!" She screamed it loud enough that security started walking toward us. "You forged documents. You took money that wasn't yours. You've been embezzling from Preston Properties for years." I stared at her in disbelief. She had flipped the entire script. Everything they had done, she was now accusing me of doing. Marcus appeared at her side, playing the devastated loyal son. "Mom, don't upset yourself. Your blood pressure." He looked at me with an expression of profound betrayal that would have been Oscar-worthy if it wasn't so sickening. "How could you do this to Dad? We trusted you. I did nothing wrong." "Then why did the FBI freeze your accounts?" Marcus demanded. "Why are there federal agents investigating you?" Before I could answer, 2 men in suits appeared in the doorway of the waiting room. Detective James Morrison and his partner Detective Sarah Kim from the Portland Police Department Financial Crimes Unit. I recognized them from news reports on other fraud cases. Detective Morrison walked straight to me. "Elijah Preston?" "Yes. You're under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and identity theft." He pulled out handcuffs while his partner read me my rights. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The handcuffs closed around my wrists. I heard my mother sob dramatically. Marcus put his arm around her shoulders. Emma stood frozen, her face white with shock. Other families in the waiting room stared openly. As the detectives led me toward the elevator, I saw someone standing near the nurse's station. A woman, in a dark blue suit, watching everything with cold, calculating eyes. Claire Dawson, my ex-fiancée. The woman I had planned to marry 4 years ago before she left me for my brother. Our eyes met for just a second. I saw no sympathy there, no regret, nothing but ice. Then she looked away, and the elevator doors closed. At the police station, I was processed like any other criminal. Fingerprints, photographs, personal belongings inventoried and locked away. They put me in a holding cell with 3 other men, all of us waiting for bail hearings or transfers or lawyers or whatever came next in the machinery of the justice system. Timothy Brooks arrived within 2 hours. They let us meet in a small interview room painted industrial beige. Timothy looked grim. "This is worse than I thought," he said, opening his briefcase. "The DA's office has filed formal charges. Multiple counts of wire fraud, embezzlement from a family business, identity theft, and conspiracy to defraud investors. If convicted on all counts, you're looking at 30 years minimum. But I didn't do any of those things." "I know. But the evidence against you is substantial. Your parents have produced emails that appear to show you requesting loans and authorizing transfers. There are bank records with your name all over them. And now your mother has filed a police report claiming you admitted to embezzling during arguments over the past few years." I put my head in my hands. "She's lying. Of course she is. But proving that is another matter." Timothy pulled out more documents. Your bail hearing is Tuesday morning. The prosecution is going to argue you're a flight risk given the amount of money involved. They'll ask for high bail. I'm guessing at least $500,000. I don't have $500,000. My accounts are frozen. I know. Which means unless we can find a bail bondsman willing to work with us, you're staying in county jail until trial. How long until trial? 6 months. Maybe longer. 6 months in jail. 6 months while my parents and Marcus built their case against me. 6 months while my business died, and my reputation was destroyed completely, and Emma came to believe I was actually guilty. Timothy left at 10 o'clock that night. I was moved from holding to a regular cell on the 3rd floor. My cellmate was a guy named Jake, mid-40s, with tattoos up and down both arms and a surprisingly gentle demeanor. He was reading a paperback novel when I climbed onto the top bunk. "What are you in for?" he asked without looking up from his book. "They say I committed fraud. Stole from my family business." "Did you?" "No. That's what everyone says." He turned a page. "But sometimes it's actually true." We didn't talk much that first night. I lay on the thin mattress staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the jail around me. Voices shouting in distant cells, footsteps in the corridor, the buzz and click of electronic locks. Somewhere someone was crying. I thought about my grandmother Margaret. She had died 2 years ago at the age of 86, sharp-minded until the very end. She had loved me in a way my parents never did. She used to tell me I had integrity, that I was the only Preston who understood what really mattered in life. If she could see me now, locked in a cell accused of crimes I didn't commit, what would she think? Sunday morning came with weak light through the small barred window. Jake was already awake, doing push-ups on the floor. After he finished, we sat on the lower bunk, and he offered me half of his breakfast, which I declined. "So you got framed by your family?" he asked. "Yeah. My parents have been running a Ponzi scheme. They forged my signatures on loan documents. Now they're trying to make it look like I was the mastermind." Jake nodded slowly. "That's cold. But smart. You're the perfect fall guy." "What do you mean?" "Think about it. You're the tech guy, right? You understand financial systems. You have your own business. It's believable that you could set up a complex fraud. Your parents are just real estate developers. They can play dumb. Say you tricked them. Who's the jury going to believe?" I hadn't thought about it that way. But Jake was right. The narrative my parents were building made a sick kind of sense. "You need evidence they can't refute," Jake said. "Something that proves you're the victim, not the criminal. Otherwise, you're going to spend a lot of years in a place like this." Monday dragged by with agonizing slowness. I met with Timothy again. He had more bad news. The prosecution had filed motions to freeze even my personal accounts, claiming I might have hidden assets. Emma had tried to visit but was turned away because she was a potential witness. At 6 o'clock Monday evening, I had an unexpected visitor. A guard came to my cell and said I had someone in the visiting room. I assumed it was Timothy again, but when I walked through the door, I saw my brother Marcus sitting at one of the small tables. He looked pleased with himself, not even trying to hide it. I almost turned around and left, but curiosity got the better of me. I sat down across from him, the table between us, a guard watching from 10 feet away. "What do you want?" Marcus leaned back in his chair, completely relaxed. "I wanted to see how you're holding up. Rough couple of days, huh? If you came here to gloat, you can leave." "I'm not gloating, little brother. I'm offering you some perspective." He smiled, and it was the cruelest expression I had ever seen on a human face. "You were always Grandma Margaret's favorite. Did you know that? She never shut up about you. How smart you were, how principled, how you were the only one in the family worth a damn." "What's your point?" "My point is that it pissed the rest of us off. Especially when she died and we found out what was in her will." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "What are you talking about?" Marcus leaned forward now, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Grandma left 70% of her estate to you. $14 million. Mom and Dad only got 20%. I got 10. Can you imagine how that felt?" The woman who built this family's reputation basically said we weren't worth her money. I had no idea. Grandmother Margaret had never mentioned her will to me. But there was a clause, Marcus continued. If you were ever convicted of fraud against the family, your inheritance would be voided. The money would be redistributed to the rest of us. The full picture came into focus with horrible clarity. You've been planning this since she died. We've been planning this for 2 years, ever since we read that clause. The Ponzi scheme, the forgeries, setting you up to look like the criminal, all of it. And it's working perfectly. You're insane. I'm practical. $14 million buys a lot of practicality. He stood up. Oh, and one more thing. Your ex-fiancée, Claire? She's the assistant district attorney assigned to your case. She left you for me 3 years ago, remember? We're engaged now, getting married in June. She's going to make absolutely certain you go to prison for a very long time. He walked out, leaving me sitting there in shock. Tuesday morning arrived, with rain beating against the small window of my cell. Bail hearing day. I was transported to the courthouse in a van with 6 other inmates, all of us shackled and wearing orange jumpsuits. The media was waiting outside. Camera flashes exploded as we were led from the van through a side entrance. The courtroom was packed. My parents sat in the front row behind the prosecution table, dressed in expensive but subdued clothing, playing the role of devastated victims. Marcus sat beside them, his arm protectively around our mother's shoulders. Emma was there too, sitting in the back, her face pale and confused. And at the prosecution table sat Claire Dawson, looking every inch the successful attorney in her dark suit and pulled back hair. She was 34 now, just 2 years older than me, and she had built a reputation as a ruthless prosecutor who rarely lost cases. I was brought in through a side door and seated at the defense table next to Timothy Brooks. The judge entered, a woman in her 60s, named Harriet Blackwood, known for being strict but fair. The prosecutor made her argument first. Claire stood and addressed the judge with confident precision. Your Honor, the defendant Elijah Preston stands accused of masterminding a sophisticated fraud scheme that has defrauded 40 innocent families of $11 million. The evidence against him is overwhelming. Bank records, forged documents bearing his signature, email correspondence directing fraudulent transactions. She paced slowly in front of the judge's bench. Mr. Preston has already demonstrated a willingness to flee. After his crimes were discovered at a family gathering on Friday night, he disappeared for several hours, ignoring 38 phone calls from family members. He only surfaced when law enforcement tracked him down. Given the severity of the charges and the substantial financial resources at his disposal, the state requests bail be set at $750,000. Timothy stood to respond. Your Honor, my client is not a flight risk. He has lived in Portland his entire life. He owns a business here, has strong community ties. Mr. Preston is the victim in this case, not the perpetrator. His own family members have been forging his signature and using his identity to commit fraud. He came to the hospital voluntarily when his father took ill, despite knowing he was under suspicion. That's not the behavior of someone planning to flee. Judge Blackwood looked over her glasses at both attorneys. Miss Dawson, what evidence do you have that the defendant was attempting to flee? He left the country club where the initial confrontation occurred and drove away without telling anyone where he was going. He turned off his phone for hours. He deliberately avoided contact with authorities. That's not fleeing, that's leaving a party, Timothy countered. He went to a diner, then to his own apartment. He was at his known address when police arrived. There's no evidence of flight. The judge made some notes. Bail is set at $500,000. Cash or bond. Defendant is to surrender his passport and may not leave the state of Oregon. Next case. The gavel came down. I felt my chest tighten. $500,000. I had maybe $70,000 in unfrozen personal accounts. Even a bail bondsman would require $50,000 cash minimum, and I couldn't access any of my business funds. I can't make that bail, I whispered to Timothy. I know. I'm sorry. I was led back to the holding area. Through the small window in the door, I could see Claire talking to my parents. She was smiling. They were all smiling. This was exactly what they wanted. Me locked up, isolated, unable to defend myself properly while they built their case. Back at the county jail, I was processed back into general population. Jake was waiting in our cell, reading another paperback. "How'd it go?" he asked. 500,000 bail. "I can't make it." He shook his head. "That's rough. How long you in for?" "Trial's probably 6 months out." 6 months is a long time to be stuck in here while your enemies run free. He closed his book. "You said your grandma loved you, right? She's dead?" 2 years ago. "Rich lady?" "She had money." "Yeah. Then she probably had a will." People like that always have detailed wills. "Did she leave you anything?" I thought about what Marcus had said. 70% of the estate. $14 million. I didn't know it at the time, but yeah, a lot. And let me guess. Your family found out and suddenly they're framing you for crimes. That's exactly what happened. Jake leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Listen to me. Rich old people who don't trust their families do things to protect their favorites. Lawyers, private investigators, secret documents. My ex-wife's grandmother did it. Hired a PI to follow her son for 2 years because she knew he was stealing from her. Documented everything. When she died, she made sure her granddaughter got proof of all the fraud." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe your grandma knew what kind of people your parents were. Maybe she left you more than just money. Maybe she left you protection." I sat back on the bunk thinking. Grandmother Margaret had been suspicious of my father in her last years. She had questioned his business decisions, asked probing questions about Preston properties. She had once told me, "I've made sure you're protected, Elijah, no matter what happens." At the time, I thought she meant the inheritance. But what if there was more? Wednesday morning brought another visitor. The guard came to my cell and said my lawyer was here. But when I got to the visiting room, Timothy wasn't alone. There was an older man with him, maybe late 70s, wearing an expensive 3-piece suit and carrying a leather briefcase that looked like it had been crafted before I was born. "Elijah, this is Walter Price," Timothy said. "He was your grandmother's personal attorney." Walter extended his hand. His grip was firm despite his age. "Mr. Preston, I apologize for not reaching out sooner. I've been waiting for the appropriate moment." "What appropriate moment?" "The moment when you were formally charged and arrested." He sat down and opened his briefcase. "Your grandmother, Margaret Preston, was one of the most intelligent and perceptive women I ever knew. In the last 5 years of her life, she became increasingly concerned about the activities of her son Richard and daughter-in-law Catherine. She knew they were criminals? She suspected. So she hired an investigator, a very thorough man named Frank Hutchins. For 5 years, Frank documented everything related to Preston properties. The Ponzi scheme, the forged signatures, the planned frame-up of you. Your grandmother knew they would eventually try to destroy you to get your inheritance." He pulled out a thick folder. "She left very specific instructions with me. I was to wait until you were formally charged. Only then would the evidence be revealed. You see, she wanted to make sure we could prove you were the victim, not the perpetrator. If we had revealed this information earlier, they might have changed their plans or destroyed evidence." "What evidence do you have?" Walter smiled. "Everything. Bank records showing the true flow of money. Video recordings of Richard and Catherine discussing the fraud. Audio of conversations with Donald Whitmore, the notary who helped forge your signatures. Forensic handwriting analysis proving the signatures aren't yours. Emails between your parents and your brother planning how to frame you. Even recordings of conversations between Marcus and Claire Dawson discussing how to use her position as prosecutor to guarantee your conviction." I couldn't breathe. "You have all of that?" "Every piece. Your grandmother spent over $200,000 on the investigation. She wanted to make absolutely certain you would be protected." He pulled out another document. "She also left you $14 million in her will. 70% of her estate. She knew they would try to steal it. This was her way of making sure they failed." Timothy was grinning. "Walter posted your bail this morning. The money came from a trust Margaret set up specifically for your legal defense. You're getting out of here today." "But there's a condition," Walter said, his expression turning serious. "We can't reveal this evidence immediately. Your ex-fiancée has already filed motions to suppress evidence from third-party sources. She's claiming anything from your deceased grandmother is hearsay and inadmissible. We need to force her hand, make her expose the conspiracy in a way she can't suppress. How do we do that? By letting her think she's winning. We go to trial. She presents her case. Your parents testify. Marcus testifies. They all commit to their lies under oath. Then, when they can't take it back, we present Margaret's evidence. We catch them in perjury. We prove the entire conspiracy. That could take months. 6 weeks, Walter said. I've already filed motions for a speedy trial. Given the media attention and your frozen business accounts, the judge will likely agree. We'll have our day in court much sooner than they expect. I was released from county jail that afternoon. The bail money came from Margaret Preston Legal Defense Trust, administered by Walter Price. It had been sitting there for 2 years, waiting for this exact situation. Outside the jail, the media was waiting. Walter had arranged for us to exit through a service entrance, avoiding most of the cameras. A car was waiting to take me back to my apartment. Timothy rode with me. Walter is old school, he said, but he's brilliant. If anyone can win this case, it's him. Why did he wait so long to contact me? Because your grandmother told him to. She wanted everything to play out exactly this way. The arrest, the bail, the public humiliation. She knew it would make your enemies overconfident. They'll get sloppy, thinking they've already won. At my apartment building, there were still a few reporters camped out, but security kept them away from the entrance. I rode the elevator to my floor and stood outside my door for a long moment before going inside. Everything looked the same as I had left it 5 days ago, but I felt like a different person. The man who had walked out of that country club party on Friday night had been naive, still believing in some basic fairness to the world. The man coming home now understood that the people closest to you could be your worst enemies. I poured whiskey and stood by the windows looking out at the city. My phone had been returned with my personal effects. I turned it on and found hundreds of messages. Most were from reporters or former friends distancing themselves, but there was one from Emma. I don't know what to believe anymore, but I still love you. Please call me when you can. I called her. She answered on the first ring. Elia, oh my God, I heard you got out. Are you okay? I'm okay. I've been so confused. Mom and Dad are saying terrible things about you, but I keep thinking about everything you've done for me over the years, and I can't believe you'd hurt anyone. She was crying. Tell me the truth. Did you steal from the family business? No, Emma. I swear to you I didn't. They've been setting me up. Why would they do that? Because Grandma Margaret left me most of her estate. They want the money. She was quiet for a long moment. How much money? $14 million. Oh, another long pause. That's a really good reason to destroy someone. Yeah. Elijah, what are you going to do? I'm going to prove I'm innocent, and I'm going to make sure they pay for what they've done. The next 6 weeks were a blur of preparation. Walter Price moved like a force of nature despite his 78 years. He filed motions, deposed witnesses, built our case with meticulous care. Timothy Brooks handled the business side, working to unfreeze my accounts and keep my company from completely collapsing. The trial was set to begin on a Monday in late July. The courthouse steps were packed with reporters and protesters. Some of the investor families had organized, holding signs demanding justice. My face was everywhere, labeled as the criminal who had stolen their retirement savings. Inside the courtroom, the same seating arrangement as the bail hearing. My parents in the front row, playing the devastated victims. Marcus beside them, the loyal son standing by his wronged family. Emma sat in the back again, torn between love for me and loyalty to our parents. And at the prosecution table, Claire Dawson, preparing to destroy me. The jury selection took 2 days. We ended up with 8 women and 4 men, ages ranging from 25 to 68. Walter studied each one carefully, asking questions that seemed random but had deeper purposes I didn't understand. On Wednesday morning, the trial officially began. Judge Blackwood called the court to order and asked Claire to present her opening statement. Claire stood and approached the jury box. She was polished, confident, devastating in her precision. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is a case about betrayal. Not the betrayal of strangers, but the betrayal of family. Elijah Preston, the defendant sitting before you, used his position of trust within his family's real estate business to orchestrate a sophisticated fraud scheme that stole $11 million from 40 innocent families. She paced slowly, making eye contact with each juror. The evidence will show that Mr. Preston forged documents, created false email accounts, and manipulated bank records to hide his crimes. When his own father confronted him about irregularities in the business accounts, Mr. Preston fled. When authorities began investigating, he claimed he was the victim, that his family had framed him. But the proof of his guilt is overwhelming and undeniable. Over the next 3 days, Claire presented her case. Bank records, showing money flowing through accounts with my name. Emails that appeared to come from my business email address, directing fraudulent transactions. Testimony from sterling federal employees about the loan guarantees I had supposedly signed. My parents testified on Thursday. My mother wore a simple black dress and cried beautifully on the stand. I trusted my son completely, she said, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. When he offered to help with the business finances, I thought he was finally taking responsibility, trying to make amends for years of disappointment. I never imagined he would steal from his own family. My father testified from a wheelchair, still recovering from his heart attack. He looked frail and broken. I worked my entire life to build Preston Properties, he said, his voice shaking. It was my legacy, something I hoped to pass to my children. To discover that my own son had been systematically destroying it, using my name and reputation to defraud innocent people, it broke my heart. Literally, Marcus testified on Friday. He played the role of heartbroken brother perfectly. I looked up to Elijah growing up, he said. He was always so smart, so good with technology and numbers. When he offered to help modernize our business systems, I was thrilled. I had no idea he was using that access to steal millions. The betrayal is devastating. Even Emma had to testify, called by the prosecution as a witness. She looked miserable on the stand. Claire walked her through questions about family dynamics, about my relationship with our parents, about my tech skills and knowledge of financial systems. Did your brother have access to Preston Properties bank accounts? Claire asked. I think so. He helped set up some of the online banking systems. Did he ever mention being involved in the family business? Not really. He always said he wanted nothing to do with it. Yet he had access to millions of dollars in accounts? I guess so. I don't really understand the business side. When Claire finished, Walter stood for cross-examination. He looked frail, leaning heavily on the defense table as he rose. He shuffled slowly toward the witness stand, and I saw several jurors watching him with concern, wondering if he was up to this task. Miss Preston, Walter said gently, you love your brother, don't you? Yes. He's always been kind to you? Always. When you needed money for college, who helped you? Emma's eyes filled with tears. Elijah did. When Mom and Dad wouldn't sign the trust documents, he offered to pay my tuition himself. $50,000? Yes. That doesn't sound like a man who's stolen $11 million and is trying to flee the country, does it? Claire objected. Speculation. Sustained, Judge Blackwood said. Walter nodded and shuffled back to his seat. He had made his point. The prosecution rested their case on Friday afternoon. Judge Blackwood adjourned until Monday for the defense to present its case. Walter, Timothy, and I met in a conference room in the courthouse. They're confident, Timothy said. Did you see Claire? She thinks she's already won. Walter smiled. Good. Overconfidence leads to mistakes. On Monday, we start our counterattack. Monday morning came with clear skies and sharp morning light streaming through the courthouse windows. Walter called our first witness, Frank Hutchins, the private investigator Margaret Preston had hired 5 years ago. Frank was a man in his 60s, former FBI agent, with a quiet authority that commanded attention. He walked through his investigation methodically. Mrs. Preston contacted me in July of 2019. She was concerned about financial irregularities at Preston Properties. She asked me to conduct a comprehensive investigation. What did you discover? Walter asked. That Preston Properties was operating a classic Ponzi scheme. New investor money was being used to pay returns to previous investors. Several construction projects existed only on paper. Richard and Catherine Preston were living well beyond their legitimate income. Claire objected repeatedly, claiming hearsay, claiming improper investigation methods, but Judge Blackwood allowed most of the testimony. "Did you discover anything about Elijah Preston's involvement?" Walter asked. "Yes. I discovered he had nothing to do with the fraud. In fact, he was the only thing keeping Preston Properties solvent. He was wiring money from his tech business to cover debts his parents didn't even know they had." "Did you discover any evidence of forgery?" "Extensive evidence. Elijah Preston's signature was forged on at least 12 major loan documents. I hired a forensic handwriting expert. The signatures aren't even close to his real signature." Over the next 2 days, Walter methodically destroyed the prosecution's case. He presented the forensic analysis. He played audio recordings of conversations between my parents and Donald Whitmore discussing the forgeries. He showed emails between Marcus and Claire Dawson planning the prosecution strategy, including discussions about suppressing evidence. That last revelation caused an uproar in the courtroom. Judge Blackwood immediately called for a recess and summoned Claire to her chambers. When they returned 30 minutes later, Claire's face was ashen. "Miss Dawson is being removed from this case," Judge Blackwood announced. "The state will appoint a new prosecutor, and we will recess for 1 week to allow them to review the evidence." But there was more to come. Walter called his final witness on Thursday of the second week, Margaret Preston, on video. The video had been recorded 6 months before her death. She sat in her home library, looking directly at the camera, with sharp, intelligent eyes. "If you're watching this, it means my grandson Elijah has been accused of crimes I know he didn't commit. It means my son Richard and his wife Catherine have done exactly what I feared they would do." For 45 minutes, my grandmother explained everything: the investigation she had commissioned, the evidence she had collected, her knowledge of the planned frame-up, her instructions to Walter to wait until the conspirators had committed themselves under oath. "I'm leaving the bulk of my estate to Elijah because he's the only one in this family with integrity," she said near the end of the video. "Richard and Catherine will try to steal it. They'll accuse him of crimes they committed. But I've made sure the truth will come out. I've made sure my boy will be protected." The courtroom was silent when the video ended. I saw my mother slumped in her seat, her face buried in her hands. My father stared straight ahead, his expression empty. Marcus had his phone out, probably texting his lawyer. The new prosecutor, a young man named David Chen, who had been assigned the case during the recess, stood up. "Your Honor, in light of this evidence, the state moves to dismiss all charges against Elijah Preston." Judge Blackwood nodded. "Motion granted. Mr. Preston, you're free to go." "Bailiff, please take Richard Preston, Catherine Preston, and Marcus Preston into custody." What happened next was chaos. Bailiffs moved toward my parents. My mother screamed. My father tried to stand from his wheelchair but stumbled. Marcus bolted for the door, but was tackled by a bailiff before he made it 3 steps. FBI agents streamed into the courtroom. I saw Agent Sarah Chen from Sterling Federal among them. They had warrants for everyone: my parents, Marcus, Donald Whitmore, and Claire Dawson. Federal charges: conspiracy, wire fraud, money laundering, witness tampering, forgery, prosecutorial misconduct. The list went on and on. Emma pushed through the crowd and threw her arms around me, sobbing. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I ever doubted you." I held her tight. "It's okay. It's over now." Walter Price stood beside us, looking satisfied. "Your grandmother would be very proud of you, Elijah. You kept your integrity even when it cost you everything." 3 months later, I stood at my grandmother's grave in Riverside Cemetery. The October air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and approaching rain. I placed a bouquet of white roses on the headstone, her favorite flowers. "Thank you," I said quietly to the granite marker. "Thank you for believing in me when no one else did. Thank you for protecting me even after you were gone." The legal proceedings had moved swiftly after the trial. My parents pleaded guilty to multiple counts of fraud and conspiracy. Richard received 15 years in federal prison. Catherine received the same. Marcus, who had been the architect of much of the frame-up, received 15 years as well. Donald Whitmore was disbarred and sentenced to 10 years. Claire Dawson, whose prosecutorial misconduct had been the most shocking revelation, was disbarred and sentenced to 8 years. None of them would be eligible for parole for at least 7 years. The 40 investor families got their money back. I used $9 million from my grandmother's estate to repay them in full, with interest. Some of them sent letters apologizing for believing I was guilty. Others simply cashed the checks and moved on with their lives. I didn't blame any of them. They had been victims too. My tech consulting business survived. It took months to rebuild trust with clients, but slowly the contracts started coming back. I hired 3 new employees to replace the ones who had left during the crisis. We were growing again. Emma moved in with me. She finished her last year at Columbia remotely, graduating with honors in May. She was applying to graduate programs now, talking about becoming a teacher. We had dinner together most nights, watching movies or just talking. She was the only family I had left, and I treasured every moment with her. The Preston Properties investors, once they learned the full truth, became some of my strongest defenders. Several of them wrote letters to the judge requesting leniency for me, even though I had never been in legal jeopardy once the evidence came out. A few became clients of my tech business. One older couple, the Richardsons, invited me to their granddaughter's wedding. I went, and it was one of the most affirming experiences of my life, seeing people who had once thought I was a criminal now welcoming me into their family celebrations. I met someone new too. Her name was Sarah, a third-grade teacher at an elementary school downtown. We met at a coffee shop in September. She was reading a book about childhood education, and I was working on a proposal for a new security system. We started talking, discovered we had similar tastes in music and movies, and exchanged numbers. On our third date, I told her everything. The whole story of my family's betrayal and my grandmother's salvation. I expected her to be shocked or frightened or to suddenly remember she had somewhere else to be. Instead, she took my hand and said, "Your grandmother sounds like an amazing woman, and you sound like someone who chose integrity over everything else, even when it cost you almost everything. That's the kind of person I want to know better." We had been seeing each other for 6 weeks now. It was early, fragile, but full of promise. She made me laugh. She challenged me to be better. She reminded me that not everyone was waiting to betray you. I turned to leave the cemetery, but before I did, I said one more thing to my grandmother's grave. I started something in your name. The Margaret Preston Foundation. It helps victims of financial fraud, especially family-related fraud. People who get betrayed by the ones they're supposed to trust most. I want to make sure they have the kind of protection you gave me. I want to make sure they know someone believes in them. As I walked back to my car, I thought about everything that had happened over the past few months. The pain, the betrayal, the moment when I thought my life was completely destroyed. And then the salvation, the proof that love could reach across death itself to protect someone. My phone buzzed. A text from Emma. "Dinner tonight? I want to try that new Thai place." I smiled and texted back. "Absolutely. See you at 7. Life wasn't perfect. I still had moments of anger about what my parents and brother had done. I still sometimes woke up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, remembering the feeling of handcuffs closing around my wrists. But those moments were getting fewer and farther between. I was healing. The most important lesson I learned through all of this was about dignity. When my parents said they wished I was never born, I could have collapsed. I could have begged. I could have tried to earn their love one more time. Instead, I walked away with my head held high. That dignity, that refusal to compromise my values, even when it cost me everything, was what ultimately saved me. Because when you stand for something real, when you refuse to let cruel people make you cruel in return, the universe has a way of taking notice. Sometimes that notice comes in the form of a grandmother who loved you enough to spend her final years making sure you would be protected. Sometimes it comes in the form of truth that cannot be suppressed forever. Sometimes it simply comes in the form of being able to look at yourself in the mirror and know you did the right thing, regardless of the cost. I started my car and drove toward home. Emma was probably already planning what we would order at dinner. Sarah had texted earlier asking if I wanted to catch a movie this weekend. The Margaret Preston Foundation had 3 new applications for assistance that I needed to review. My business had a proposal due by Friday. Life was full and moving forward. And my parents, my brother, and my ex-fiancée were all in federal prison, exactly where they belonged. Sometimes justice takes time. Sometimes you have to lose everything before you can see clearly what really matters. But in the end, if you hold on to your integrity, if you refuse to become what they tried to make you, you win. Not because you destroyed them, but because you remained yourself. That's the victory that lasts. That's the triumph that means something. As I pulled into my parking garage, I thought about that night at the country club, standing in front of 100 people, while my parents humiliated me. I remembered the words I spoke. If that is what you wish, then consider me as if I never existed. I had meant it as a goodbye. They had taken it as a threat. Both interpretations turned out to be true. I existed now in a way I never had before. Authentic, free, surrounded by people who valued me for who I actually was, rather than who they wanted me to be. And my parents, for all practical purposes, no longer existed in my life. They were gone, locked away, their cruel words and manipulations silenced. I took the elevator up to my floor and unlocked my apartment door. Home, my sanctuary. The place I had built with my own hands and my own money, owing nothing to anyone except myself. I had survived. More than survived. I had won. So, let me ask you something. Have you ever had to walk away from people you loved because staying meant losing yourself? Have you ever stood up for what was right even when it cost you everything? What would you have done in my situation? Would you have signed those papers to save the family business, or would you have walked away like I did? If this story touched you, if it made you think about your own relationships and the price of integrity, I hope you'll share it. Someone out there might need to hear that it's okay to walk away from people who hurt you, even if they're family. Someone might need to know that standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's survival. Leave a comment telling me your thoughts. Have you experienced betrayal from someone close? How did you handle it? I read every comment, and I love hearing your stories. If you haven't already, please hit that like button and subscribe. These stories take time to research and craft, and your support means everything. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story about justice, betrayal, and the courage it takes to stand tall when everyone wants you to fall. And most importantly, take care of yourselves. Remember that you don't owe loyalty to people who treat you like you're worthless. You don't owe your family anything if they refuse to treat you with basic human dignity. The family you choose, the people who love you for who you really are, those relationships are the ones worth fighting for. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. I hope you walk away from this with your head a little higher and your boundaries a little stronger. Until next time, stay strong, stay true to yourself, and never let anyone make you feel like you're not enough. You are enough. You always have been. Take care.